So we have this rivalry with houses divided, fathers against sons, brothers against brothers. But rivalry aside, how can a father really hate his son?
Oh, very easily.
This is LA, our city, our home, Los Angeles. We never walk alone. Forever true, we'll stay in tribute to our city. No matter where we go, this is our home. On the Sunset Strip, the devil's hard at work. If you wanna play, you gotta pay, you know, to keep the clubs from going under. That's the price that breaks the floors every fool before. Underneath the haze, the streets of this maze, all the way from the 10 to the 5 to the 134. These streets are nothing but a parking lot, but I don't care, 'cause I'm not going anywhere. This is LA, our city, our home, Los Angeles. We never walk alone. Forever true, we'll stay in tribute to our city. No matter where we go, this is our home.
I've worked all over the country as a sportscaster. I've traveled to all 50 states. There is nothing like the USC-UCLA rivalry anywhere in our country, and we share a city together. One of the great cities in the world.
The rest of the country thinks that LA is LA. Glitz, glamour, you know, the surf, the Hollywood premieres, everyone's having fun driving around in convertibles on sunny days. But believe me, I mean, SC, UCLA, there's an intensity to that rivalry that I think is unmatched across the country.
The intensity of that game was definitely like an NFL playoff game.
Since there is no NFL team in LA, we are kind of the NFL team, so to speak.
It's as close to a street brawl as you can get to. We wanted to butcher them.
So the only reason I went to UCLA was to beat the hell out of USC. I hit you and your mama at the same time.
I can still remember Ed Ogeron telling the kid that wore a blue shirt to the meeting to take his shirt off and go and went over and ripped kids' shirts off, and they got to sit shirtless in the meeting because they wore a blue shirt that day.
And if I have to, you know, kick you between your teeth, I'm going to kick you between your teeth. But that's just what that game meant to the city of LA.
In this one, you share the same city, and so you live with that win or that loss for an entire year.
You know you're in the biggest game of your life when you walk in there and there's 100,000 people in either stadium.
This isn't just a game that's played in stadiums, but it's a game where kids either play for the Bruins or the Trojans in parks, in playgrounds all over Los Angeles.
The upbringing here in LA, I mean, they teach them early. You know, the family, they're either SC or UCLA, so the kid's going to have that same allegiance as mom and dad.
You're either raised a Bruin or you're raised a Trojan. Halloween here is hysterical because there's all kinds of little Bruins and all kinds of little Trojans coming around begging for candy.
Well, you know, I don't tell a lot of people, but I grew up watching USC football. My dad went to SC for film school. Once I got into UCLA, the whole thing changed. I can't stand SC.
And that's where it gets kind of interesting, because that's where you see sometimes where some of those kids who grow up in one family will end up going to the other school. And that's where you get this rivalry playing out, you know, around the dinner table.
In fact, even in my own household, half my family is UCLA, the other half was USC, and I actually committed to USC, withdrew my commitment because they lost the Freedom Bowl and fired Larry Smith, and went to UCLA.
My dad and I were on total opposite ends of the thing. He was a huge Bruin fan. My dad passed away a couple of years ago, and we had a memorial service at Griffith Park. And one of the things I said at the end of the memorial service that cracked the crowd up was the fact that there's one less Bruin now that my dad's gone.
USC's position as a college football powerhouse started with head coach Howard Jones, who was hired by the Trojans in 1925.
When you think about any great athletic program, particularly football program, it always starts with someone. You know, you can't have a great heritage or legacy unless it starts with someone, and Howard Jones really got that started at USC.
He's really the godfather of USC, if you will. You know, he won 4 national championships and really put USC on the map.
Jones was recommended to USC by Notre Dame coach Knute Rockne. He coached the Trojans from 1925 until 1940, and he led Southern California to 4 national titles during that period. It was under Coach Jones that USC completely smothered UCLA in the first game of the rivalry, 76-0.
For the early years, for USC, playing UCLA was like playing a high school team. And it took time for the Bruins to really get their program going.
From 1929 until 1949, USC ruled the series with 13 wins, while the Bruins only won 2, and 4 games ended in a tie. That all changed when UCLA hired Red Sanders as their head coach.
Sanders was the one that gave UCLA confidence that it could compete on a national level for national championships. I mean, he was the one that brought the school out of the dark ages of football.
After losing the first game against USC, Sanders put his stamp on the rivalry with a single wing formation that jumped all over the Trojans 39-0 in the 1950 game. Sanders coached UCLA to the school's only national title in 1954 and gave the Bruins a decade of dominance over USC with 6 wins and 3 losses before he tragically died of a heart attack in 1958. Happy days in 1950s Westwood spelled doom across town at USC, and the Trojans launched the 60s with the hiring of a new coach, John McKay. It was not a popular choice with the USC faithful.
He was an assistant at Oregon, and now we're going to hire him to coach at USC. It didn't make sense to a lot of people.
After posting losing records in his first 2 seasons at USC, including losses to both rivals Notre Dame and UCLA in 1961, many people thought McKay's job was in danger. His family's fears seemed to be confirmed when McKay received a call at home from USC President Dr. Norman Topping, asking him for a meeting to discuss the team's future.
He wanted my dad to come to his office, but my dad said, no, I don't want to go to your office. So you meet me at my office. So my dad's office in those days off campus was a place called Julie's.
Of course, you know Coach McKay was an Irishman, and he did a lot of his thinking in a bar called Julie's right across the street from his office on campus.
We were at home just waiting for him. He thought he might be getting fired. And he got home after we were asleep and wakes up the next morning and the phone rings and it's Dr. Topping. And Dr. Topping says to him, he says, Coach, I got to ask you a rather embarrassing question. My dad said, what's that? Dr. Topping said, did I fire you last night? And my dad said, no, you gave me a 3-year extension.
The following year, McKay led USC to an undefeated season that was capped with a victory over Wisconsin in the Rose Bowl and the first national title for the Trojans in 23 years. Although USC took 7 of the 10 rivalry games against UCLA in the 60s, 2 of the biggest wins in that decade went to the Bruins in back-to-back seasons of 1965 and 66. Terry Donahue, a walk-on player on that Bruins squad, would later become the winningest coach in UCLA and Pac-12 history.
Not only did Terry Donahue play football at UCLA, he was a lineman. Think about that. Terry Donahue's the same size as me.
Terry wasn't a big guy. But boy, he had all that intensity and fire in his belly.
In the 1965 game, Donahue and his Bruin teammates had to muster up all the fire they could find against the heavily favored Trojans.
USC dominated the game. Mike Garrett rushed for over 200 yards, but fumbled 3 times. UCLA was behind late in the game.
UCLA was down by 10 points late in the 4th quarter. The Bruins scored a touchdown and then recovered an onside kick to give themselves a chance for the victory. With the game now in the Bruins' grasp, UCLA coach Tommy Prothro called a play for quarterback Gary Beeben to throw a pass to their star halfback, Mel Farr.
When we were calling the sequence on the sidelines, he said, make sure you throw to Farr. When I dropped back and I looked, I could see that Altenberg was the one that was open, so I didn't even think about our conversation.
Down for the Bruins. Beeben trying to catch lightning in a bottle, takes the snap, rolls to his right, sets, looks, puts it in the air, long down the left side, he's got Altenberg at the 5, touchdown UCLA!
Beeben's 52-yard touchdown pass gave the underdog Bruins an amazing come-from-behind victory over McKay's Trojans.
I was 12, I had to drive home with my dad in that car. I'll never forget the drive. I think it took a week to get home, it felt like it. It was tough.
None of the seniors expected to be in that kind of game with SC for the Rose Bowl. They had never come that close during their time. It was such a Cinderella season.
The victorious Bruins went on to upset number 1 ranked Michigan State in the Rose Bowl, and in 1966, fans anticipated another great rivalry game. But there was a twist.
Our All-American quarterback, Gary Beeben, couldn't play in the game.
Beeben had broken his ankle in the previous game against Stanford and was unable to play against USC.
That gave Norm Dow the opportunity to have literally his day in the sun, and he really made the most of it.
The Bruins started senior backup quarterback Norman Dow that day, and in an upset, UCLA ran to a 14-7 victory over USC, earning Dow a ride off the field from his teammates in the first and only game he ever started for the Bruins. Dow's epic performance for UCLA foreshadowed a game played a quarter of a century later when another Bruin stepped out of the shadows and into the glory of the USC-UCLA rivalry.
This is a series that's featured some of the greatest players of all time to play on one side or the other, SC or UCLA, but oftentimes this is the regular guy that steps up to the front, and there's no greater example than that than John Barnes.
Nobody in the history of the rivalry on either side has ever done a better job for their team than John Barnes. Nobody.
I remember walking through the tunnel for the start of the game and remembering that a year ago I was up in the stands just watching it, and now I was out there, the starting quarterback.
Go back 12 months to the previous November. He didn't have a ticket, he couldn't get in. He snuck into that game and watched from the top.
I remember being up there and wondering what it would be like to be down there.
John Barnes was a junior quarterback at UC Santa Barbara the year he attended the USC-UCLA game. It would be the last year of football at Santa Barbara as school officials decided to close the program.
When they canceled the program, I was just really trying to find another place to go, and that's where the idea came to go walk on at UCLA.
John Barnes walks in my office, he's got a full suit, tie, and coat on.
He took a double take at me. I remember him saying he thought I was an insurance salesman down here trying to sell insurance.
During the meeting, Homer Smith, the offensive coordinator at UCLA, looked at Barnes' game tapes and had questions about his footwork, so he took him onto the practice field.
The team is doing sprints down the sideline, and I'm like on the other field over here doing dropbacks in my suit and tie.
Although Barnes was offered a chance to walk on, Coach Donahue made it clear he would not have a chance to get into a game.
And I told John during the interview, I said, John, I'd be happy to give you a place to come and finish your last year of football. I said, but I will tell you right up front that I can't give you any reps. I can't give you any time.
I was always the underdog my whole entire career, working from the bottom up to get any type of recognition. And so I was very thankful that he gave me the opportunity, and I was hoping that I would prove him wrong at the same time.
Barnes began the season as UCLA's fifth-string quarterback and had little hope of entering any game, much less the rivalry game versus USC that he had watched from the stands less than a year before.
Barnes would not have played in that game at all, wouldn't even have been on the UCLA team had three guys not been hurt. And through a series of happenstance, he lands up playing in that game.
I had that feeling in my gut, like, just don't go out there and embarrass yourself. And that was how I felt as I was walking through that tunnel, scared of failing.
The Bruins were heavy underdogs against the Pac-10 leading Trojans that day, and although Barnes played well, USC led 31-17 with less than 13 minutes left in the game. A J.J. Stokes touchdown cut the lead to 7, and then another strike to Stokes, followed by his amazing run through the USC defense, led to another UCLA touchdown and set up the game's dramatic winning score.
SC coming up on 3rd and 4, man coverage, they're bringing the house against a fifth-string walk-on, and then we do an audible.
Barnes' touchdown pass gave UCLA the winning points in the most improbable underdog story in the history of the rivalry.
His performance that night with J.J. Stokes was magical. It really was, and it was the things that legends are made of. I still have the tape. I play it maybe once every year or two just to watch it, because it's like, are you kidding me? This can't happen in college football.
You know, as I look back on that game, it means a lot to me for my folks, for all the work that they did in terms of, you know, taking me to all the games. And I remember after the game, I grabbed the ball. ESPN wanted to do an interview on me, and I told them no, and I ran up and I gave it to my dad.
In 1967, USC ran onto the field in a matchup against UCLA some have called the game of the century. There were no backup phenoms in this one. It was the Bruins star quarterback Gary Beeben and Trojans running sensation O.J. Simpson locked in a race for the Heisman. The game had national title implications, with UCLA ranked number 1 and USC number 2.
That 67 game was really the culmination for the UCLA seniors of promise to try to win a national championship, and we got there. I mean, that was the game.
It was the greatest game in the history of college football, and I'll tell you why. Name a game where these things were at stake. Number 1 ranking in the country, the Rose Bowl, and the Heisman Trophy.
Gary Beeben and O.J. were the two dominant figures in college football at the time. And here they were in an epic struggle.
The epic struggle between Beeben and Simpson brought out the best in both and included an amazing 13-yard touchdown run by O.J. Beeben matched Simpson play for play, including a 53-yard bomb to George Farmer for a touchdown and another touchdown strike to Dave Nettles to give the Bruins the lead. With 10 minutes to go and trailing 20-14, USC had 3rd and 7 from their own 36. What happened next is the stuff of legend.
1967 gives us one of the greatest plays in college football history. It's that simple. It's an iconic play, and that makes that sort of one of the iconic games of college football.
And I can still see it, you know, and then cheering and yelling as he was running down the field. Big stuff.
Gets a block, cuts back, he's at the 40, cuts back toward the middle at the 30. He's running at
Even being a UCLA fan and ex-player, you had to applaud. You had to really applaud O.J. for that run.
at the 10-5, touchdown USA.
USC beat UCLA 21-20 and went on to defeat Indiana in the Rose Bowl to capture the second national title under Coach McKay. However, Gary Beeben edged out O.J. Simpson to win the 1967 Heisman Trophy, the only Heisman in the history of UCLA.
Years later, I gained a greater respect for the trophy, but when I received it, my mind was still back 2 points behind at the Coliseums.
If you're going to put a Mount Rushmore of UCLA football, Beeben's the first guy that goes up.
The following season, Simpson won the Heisman Trophy, something that is quite a tradition at USC.
This is a university that's produced an awful lot of Heisman Trophy winners, starting with Mike Garrett, and I think, you know, he really set the tone, the kind of player that he was.
Mike Garrett won the first of USC's 6 Heismans in 1965. The 6 trophies ranked behind Notre Dame and Ohio State as the most in college football. Other USC Heisman winners include Charles White, Marcus Allen, Carson Palmer, and Matt Leinart.
I remember when I won, everyone said no matter what you do, you'll always be Heisman Trophy winner, Matt Leinart, and it's pretty cool. After I won, and then just, you know, Marcus was there and Mike Garrett was there, and Charles White were there, and just being a part of that club is probably the biggest honor I've ever received.
Hey, I've been to Heritage Hall a bunch of times. I've seen Mike Garrett's and O.J. Simpson's and Charles White and Reggie Bush's. Actually, I don't think that's there anymore.
USC running back Reggie Bush was at the center of a huge controversy stemming from allegations that his family received improper benefits from a professional sports agent while Bush still played football for the Trojans. This led to severe NCAA sanctions against USC, including the forfeiture of Bush's 2005 Heisman Trophy.
Reggie Bush was a phenomenal football player here. We hope we get a lot more guys who come and play like Reggie Bush and win Heisman trophies. You know, what happened here at the end of his career was not good, and I think Reggie would appreciate that, and we certainly appreciate that here. And while he was a great player, we expect players to be great on the field, but off the field as well.
Pat Hayden, one of the legends of Trojan football, was hired by USC as its athletic director to help restore the school's prominence after the NCAA sanctions were announced. Hayden played quarterback for the Trojans in the early 70s and was on 2 national championship teams in 1972 and 1974. USC's 1972 team is widely praised as one of the best in college football history.
And we blew everybody out. I mean, it was wow, you know.
John McKay coached the USC 1972 and 1974 national championship teams. His 4 national titles in 16 years of coaching the Trojans places him in the elite circle of top coaches in college football history.
He was the best football coach I ever knew. He knew more about the total game than anybody I've ever known. He was in charge of the offense, he was in charge of the defense, he was in charge of everything.
This is a football coach who was on Johnny Carson. You know, the guy knew how to deliver a punchline. So the media, for that reason alone, loved him because he was such a colorful coach.
He was wonderful with the press, the first guy with a funny line, but he was tough on players. He was really hard on guys and hard on quarterbacks.
Coach McKay's discipline with quarterbacks ran deep. Rival UCLA quarterback John Shara, who played high school football with Coach McKay's son, J.K., learned this firsthand during a rivalry game against USC.
And I threw this ball down the sideline right in front of Coach McKay, and Norm Anderson was wide open, and I overthrew him. And I happened to glance at Coach McKay, who couldn't have been more than 5 feet from me. He says, "John, you got to make that throw." And I remember saying, "This is weird."
Dominant guy in terms of, everybody was on edge and a little bit afraid of him.
You didn't get a lot of praise from my dad. A lot of players maybe didn't like him when they played for him, but I think they all liked him later in life. He got a lot of great letters, and guys came and saw him near the end of his life.
Although added motivation is not often needed for UCLA-USC rivalry games, sometimes it does play a role. However, it can backfire, as UCLA's Pepper Rogers learned in the 1973 game versus McKay's Trojans. A trip to the Rose Bowl was on the line for the winner of that game.
The UCLA players came out with roses in their hands or in their teeth, and I think white shoes, which were unheard of in those days as well.
And I can remember our players standing in the tunnel just with a kind of a look on their face that was saying, we're going to take those roses and stuck them down your throat,
We had a linebacker named Jimmy Sims, who was a really good player, and he was standing next to my dad, and he said something like this to my dad. He said, "Look at those guys, they think they have a chance."
Sims was correct. It was USC who ran off the field that day carrying roses in a 23-13 victory over UCLA. However, the Trojans have also been guilty of pregame tactics that riled up their rival.
I remember Keyshawn Johnson taking the USC flag and throwing it into the field. It was at that moment that we knew we were going to win the game, because it just absolutely infuriated our entire team.
Johnson might have been feeling confident because USC had already clinched the Rose Bowl, but it was UCLA that prevailed in the 1995 game, 24-20. The all-time greatest motivational ploy in the rivalry might have been played by UCLA lineman Dave Daboff. The Bruins were heavy underdogs in the 1959 clash against undefeated USC, and so Daboff thought sending his own team flowers might inspire them.
I had my roommate send UCLA a big tray of pansies and put on there, roses are red, violets are blue, Bruins are a bunch of pansies. Well, it irritated every single ball player and the coaches too. I sent it and I got irritated. It was funny.
UCLA, led by their fired-up quarterback Billy Kilmer, upset USC 10-3. The underdog role for the Bruins often comes from the prevailing opinion in Los Angeles that UCLA is the basketball school while USC is the football school.
SC was always known for their tailbacks, and if you wanted to win the Heisman Trophy, SC was the place to go.
Growing up, I was more of a basketball player, and UCLA basketball was very relevant with Ed O'Bannon, Charles O'Bannon, so I was always rooting for UCLA.
My friends would say, there is no way that you should ever think of yourself putting on that Bruin uniform, and if you were going to put on the Bruin uniform, it's only one reason to put it on, maybe to play basketball.
I knew when I was born I was going to USC because SC was the best and I wanted to compete against the best. They had a great tradition. Had I been a basketball player, the tallest Greek in the world, I would have gone to UCLA to play basketball for the same reason.
Let's not fool ourselves. USC has a different history in football, and you've had some great players come through there, and all of them have been paid very well. And
although USC has a rich history of producing great football players, UCLA has also had some fantastic athletes on the gridiron, as Bruin fans are quick to point out.
Greatest Bruins of all time, got to look at Jackie Robinson, four-sport athlete, broke the color barrier in MLB baseball. Gary Beeman, first Heisman Trophy winner, only Heisman Trophy winner. Troy Aikman, three-time Super Bowl champion. And one of the greatest linebackers ever to play college football was Ken Norton Jr.
So Ken Norton, did they really want to talk about Ken Norton, the UCLA fans?
Ken Norton was a great linebacker for UCLA. And then he was supposed to be a coach at UCLA. I mean, the fans there, they wanted to keep him in the family. He ends up going to USC, where he works for Pete Carroll. And that was a really big deal because that's like a defection.
He was one of my favorite linebackers at UCLA. And all of a sudden he goes and coaches at USC, and I'm just scratching my head saying, oh my God, Ken, I love you so much, but what are you doing in that Trojan outfit?
He was hanging around UCLA. The Bruins didn't want to hire him. Pete Carroll came along and said, we'll hire you. Come on, be our linebackers coach. And he just awesome, just an awesome catch for Pete Carroll.
Ken was coaching on the sidelines. It was at the Coliseum, and I had snuck over as a reporter. And I looked at Ken, and it was a crucial part of the game, and Ken looked at me, and he just pointed, and we hugged right in the middle of the game. And I think that's the only time you've ever had two Bruins hugging on a Trojan sidelines, one of the first.
Fans filling the stadium have often witnessed major games that determine bowl positions, national rankings, and Heisman Trophy races. But ultimately, when the teams line up for the kickoff, it is the personal nature of the rivalry that motivates players.
You want to beat that team. You want to have the bragging rights of the city.
You have bragging rights for the whole year. That's worth everything.
You could walk through Los Angeles and say, yeah, we beat our rival. We beat USC this year.
For players who have finished their career or fans who never had a chance to play, the magnitude of the game is often enhanced with a friendly bet.
I remember betting a stack of baseball cards that SC would beat UCLA. This is a 67 game.
It's definitely something we get together with once a year, and somebody's buying lunch or somebody's doing a shot more than the other guy.
Raising the ante on the bets are the embarrassment bets. John Ireland, a UCLA grad, once made a bet with the outcome involving his telephone.
The bet was the loser gives up control of his answering machine. And this was before cell phones. Hi, this is John. I'm not here, but while I have your attention, let me talk about the greatness of USC. And people were calling me and saying, what is wrong with you?
The stakes never seemed higher than in 1976 when UCLA hired Terry Donahue and USC hired John Robinson to coach the respective universities. Their competition forged a union that would mark the golden age of the rivalry.
Well, we started together. Nobody knew who we were, you know, and it was one of those, well, we'll see how these two rookies do.
Coach Robinson and Coach Donahue had a great rivalry because they were at the same stage of their careers. They were both really good football coaches.
Donahue versus Robinson was really a great time for USC UCLA because it was like two heavyweights in the middle of the ring trading haymakers.
In 1976, the first round of the Donahue-Robinson rivalry featured one of the best UCLA teams in its history.
We were on a roll. We were coming out of the gate that season, ranked in the top 5 in the nation. So we went into that game playing for the Rose Bowl.
The magnitude of that game, the magnitude of the fact you might go to the Rose Bowl, you might be in the national championship picture, all of that was at stake.
The day got off to an inauspicious start for Coach Robinson.
I thought I was an athlete then, and I ran on the field in front of my team, and somebody clipped my heel, and I went face down in the dirt, and the whole damn team ran right over me.
However, it was UCLA that stumbled during the game as USC easily won 24-14.
I can remember to this day that if you had to rank all your losses and the pain of the losses, that loss probably ranked us up there very near the top.
We played about as good as you could play. We were able to establish that we could run the football on you and wear you down. Then late in the game, we were a pretty dominant team.
The dominance continued for USC as they beat UCLA in 1977 and 1978. The 1978 season concluded with the Trojans crowned in the coaches' poll as the national champions of college football.
We weren't a team that was expected to do that, but the bar was set incredibly high by John Robinson.
That national championship team, to me, in my mind, was one of the greatest thrills that I've ever had. It's bigger than a Super Bowl. For me, it was bigger than a Super Bowl.
When I see ex-players and we come away, you hug and you look at each other and say, yeah, we were special, you know, and that never goes away.
Although Terry Donahue was a future College Hall of Fame coach, sharing a city with a program that had a history of national championships drove him and everyone at UCLA to near obsession with wanting to beat the Trojans.
We divided our season into 3 categories. The first category was the non-conference games, the second category was the conference games, and the third category was the USC game.
I don't know what it meant to USC when we were playing, but I know what it meant to UCLA, and it meant everything.
That was the most important thing for us as a football team, is to beat USC.
USC football can be such a big thing in Southern California that it even shadowed Donahue in church on Sundays.
Terry Donahue goes to the Catholic Church, and they kept on playing the SC songs, and so Terry went up there and said, look, I want a little bit of Bruin music. So next time he came into church, that next Sunday, they played the Bruin song.
Going into the 1979 season, the Trojans had just won the national championship and had beaten UCLA in all of Donahue's first 3 years. So the coach understood he would have to beat USC soon.
He made no apologies for it. He understood that he would be judged every year by how he did against USC.
I think any football coach at UCLA or SC that downplays the importance of that game is doomed for failure.
Although the Rose Bowl was on the line for both teams, beating USC in 1979 would be a tall order for UCLA. The Trojans' backfield consisted of All-American quarterback Paul McDonald and 2 running backs that would go on to win the Heisman Trophy in Marcus Allen and Charles White. Both backs earned the respect of their teammates for their bruising runs.
They attacked any defender. When they went after somebody, they ran into them like, bring some more. Come on.
It was Charles White who ran wild that day, scoring a rivalry record 4 touchdowns and a 49-14 romp for the Trojans.
He had a broken nose, I think, early in that game. Maybe the first or second series, he had a broken nose. He comes back, he's got some tape on his nose. Give me the ball again. Oh, give me the ball, I want to go again. You know, broke his nose. No problem. Not going to stop Charles White.
With his 4th straight loss, the pressure on Donahue's job increased. At halftime of that 79 game, former UCLA quarterback Mark Harmon was asked in the broadcast booth whether Donahue should be fired.
He kind of hemmed and hawed a little bit and thought about it because they were having a tough year, down 35-0 to the Trojans. He'd never beaten the Trojans. He finally said, no, I'm with Terry. I'm with Terry. I'm sticking by Terry.
No matter how well Terry Donahue did at UCLA, if he couldn't beat USC at the end of the season, it wasn't going to work. He was going to be gone.
Although every USC-UCLA rivalry game is huge, the 1980 game was especially significant to Donahue because if UCLA was defeated, he would very likely lose his job.
We had lost 4 years in a row, and it was crucial that we win that game. There were rumors certainly on the street that if we didn't win the game, I was going to be fired.
In the 1980 game, UCLA held Marcus Allen to only 72 yards rushing, but still trailed 17-13 late in the 4th quarter when Bruins quarterback Jay Schrader took the snap from UCLA's 42-yard line and threw a long pass down the sideline toward USC's Jeff Fisher, who was covering UCLA's Freeman McNeil.
Here the ball is in the air.
All Fisher had to do was knock the ball down.
And the ball is not only in the air, but as it's in the air, you could see that Jeff Fisher had it. I thought Jeff Fisher was going to catch the ball.
Knock the ball down, come on.
And at that moment when he catches the ball, it's the Bill Buckner, feeling. And it's the Billy Buckner feeling of, oh, how could that happen?
All Fisher had to do was knock the ball down, and instead he tried to intercept it. And instead of intercepting it, he tipped it up in the air to Freeman McNeil, and he scored a touchdown, and now we're in the dark days.
McNeil's touchdown proved to be the winning points as UCLA beat USC 20-17 and finally broke Donahue's 4-game losing streak against the Trojans and may have saved his job.
It very well might have been the most important win of my career. If the critics were correct and I was going to be fired after that game, they never saw it happen.
The Trojans' 1980 loss to UCLA was the only one Ronnie Lott suffered against the Bruins in an illustrious career at USC. Lott is considered one of the best defensive backs to ever play football, and some years later, his son, Ryan Neese, also suited up for the rivalry game.
I remember, going into the locker room and preparing for the game, and I remember opening up the program. and going through the program. Of course, there's a picture of my dad, you know, and to see him in those colors and to see where I was in my career and the opportunity that I had, it was emotional.
As kickoff neared, it was also a day of emotions for Lott, but his emotions were mixed because his son Ryan was wearing the blue and gold of UCLA.
I have a lot of friends to this day that swear to me that I was crazy for letting my son go to UCLA.
It's got to be incredible, you know, for Ronnie Lott, one of the great Trojans, period, to have his son go to UCLA.
I was hoping that he would go to SC. At the time, they were going through a coaching change, and they're not recruiting him. And it turns out that he decides to go to UCLA.
I got juiced up and got excited every time we had the opportunity to play that team. I mean, I grew up somewhat of a Trojan fan, and so I crossed over. I crossed over to the good side. I saw the light.
He crossed over to the dark side. That's what he did. He crossed over to the dark side.
Although Neese would never acknowledge any continued allegiance to USC, being on both sides of the rivalry did create some interesting moments for him.
It was rivalry week. We had our big bonfire on Thursday, and the whole student body and cheerleaders and band and football team comes out, and you say a few words, and the team captains get up there and talk a little bit and get the crowd all fired up. And then I came as the captain to come up and speak, and I'm getting the crowd fired up, and literally you could say anything you wanted and they were going to cheer for you. All of a sudden I said, I can't wait for you guys to come out and watch us beat UCLA. And I was like, oh, I mean USC on Saturday. And all of a sudden the crowd was like, ah, boo.
It wasn't a slip. It was just him being him. I know that he would never say that he wanted the other colors, but deep down inside, there had to be a moment there that he was like, you know, I could have been a Trojan.
There comes a point in time where you separate, you know, your history of what school you went to with the father-son relationship, and you just want the best for your son.
He just said, hey, I trust you and trust your opinion, and I'm going to stay out of it. I'm going to support you wherever you go. I still have never seen him in Bruin colors. I still have never been able to get him to do that.
I'm not one of those dads that wore powder blue. You will never catch me in powder blue.
In the case of Ryan Neese, USC missed out on a top recruit. A generation prior, Trojans coach John McKay had not one, but two top recruits living in his home. His son J.K. McKay, and star quarterback Pat Hayden, who was living with the McKays because his parents had moved.
Pat and I were at Bishop Mont High School. We were getting recruited by a lot of schools across the country, and Pat was living with me at the time. My dad always said to us, you know, I want you guys to go where you feel most comfortable. I'm not sure he actually meant it.
And it was interesting that Coach McKay always knew when UCLA was going to be recruiting me, or Notre Dame or Texas, and he always answered the front door when Ara Parsegan or somebody was coming to recruit me.
My dad got wind of the fact that we were thinking seriously about going to Notre Dame, and he called me in. I'll never forget it. He called me in by myself without Pat, and he said, John, I don't care where you go to school. I need the quarterback.
Parsegian and the Irish lost out on both Hayden and McKay as the duo decided to stay home and sign with USC. They went on to form one of the best pass-catch tandems in Trojans history. But they were just two of the many great recruits that come out of Southern California high schools every year.
You can stock a national championship team year after year just from the players who come from this area.
The top 20 high school players coming out of Southern California were recruited by both schools.
And so if you win the rivalry game, you have that bragging rights. You can go to kids and say, hey, we're on our way up. We beat UCLA. They're on their way down.
Although winning the USC-UCLA game often delivered future great recruits, in many years it also provided the more immediate reward of playing in the Rose Bowl.
The prize of going to the Rose Bowl was huge.
I chose UCLA and really a Pac-10 school because I wanted to play in the Granddaddy at the Rose Bowl.
The Rose Bowl was on the line in the back-to-back seasons of 1987 and 1988, with the featured attraction being the quarterback duel of UCLA's Troy Aikman versus USC's Rodney Peete. In the 87 game, USC was down 10-0 near the end of the half, but were knocking on the end zone door.
They have a chance to make it close right at the end. Rodney Peete throws an interception.
Eric Turner picks it off. He looks like he's going all the way.
Eric Turner picks off one, takes it all the way down, and Rodney Peete, slow as frozen syrup in the refrigerator, catches Eric Turner, and we can't score to get over that hump.
Although he threw an interception, Pete's tackle as time expired at the half kept USC in the game. In the second half, the Trojans roared back, and with 7 minutes left, they trailed 13-10 with the ball on the Bruins' 34-yard line.
I think they may be in the neutral zone there, but they got away with it. That's into the corner. Affolter! No! Yes! They call it touchdown.
Eric Affolter's winning touchdown grab is still a source of debate to this day, with many Bruins claiming the catch was out of bounds.
He caught it in bounds, but unfortunately his feet were not.
In the run-up during game week in 1988, USC quarterback Rodney Peete is mysteriously nowhere to be found.
It's game week. Everyone's all excited. Where's Rodney Peete?
The diagnosis on Rodney Peete is that he has measles.
Rodney Peete was sick. He had the measles, and of course UCLA fans will say he was dogging it and he was, doing gamesmanship and all that.
I actually caught him from him, so I wasn't too happy about it. These measles were, 105-degree temperature. It was the closest thing to death I ever experienced.
Rodney Peete is in the hospital with the measles, and it looks like USC is dead. But he pulls a Willis Reed. He comes out there, and they end up winning the game.
The USC head coach on the sidelines for the 1987 and 1988 victories was Larry Smith. John Robinson left USC after the 1982 season to coach the Los Angeles Rams in the NFL, but he returned to USC in 1993, and his first clash against his old foe Terry Donahue would yield yet another epic game in the series, with the Rose Bowl on the line again for both teams. Although UCLA led 27-21 late in the fourth quarter, USC completed a long pass down to the 3-yard line, and it looked like a sure Trojan victory.
SC's as good as in the Rose Bowl. They're down inside the 5-yard line. Time is running out. All I got to do is get the ball in.
I was watching that game and I kind of felt like there was nothing I could do as a UCLA fan other than just watch my team die.
I started using our timeouts. We had 3 timeouts left. I started using them all. Because I figured they were going to score, and if they scored, I wanted to have some time left on the clock.
They try handing it off to Waters. He can't do it. Next play.
If you're going to throw, second down's the time to throw.
And Rob Johnson rolled out to his right.
Rob Johnson rolls out. He's got a quick flip into the end zone.
And we're handing out roses on the sidelines. And I knew right when I saw that, you don't count your chickens.
And all of a sudden, this hero with a cape shows up. And
in one of the most exhilarating, heart-wrenching, dramatic wins in the history of this series. The Bruins of UCLA.
And as I'm walking off the field, I'm saying, why didn't I run 4 straight times?
It was a very satisfying victory for us. And it was as big a win as we'd ever had.
In their rivalry within a rivalry, John Robinson and Terry Donahue played each other 10 times, both earning 5 victories. When the series began, they were not friends, but by its end, the hard edges had softened.
We were not particularly good friends early in our career, but later on, our relationship definitely changed, and I think, had a very real and deep admiration for one another.
I always took great pride, and with Terry, I think we shared it, that we did everything we could to keep the rivalry classy. He's a good man.
The USC-UCLA battles on the football field can often extend to divisions in numerous households throughout Los Angeles, where a Bruin is married to a Trojan.
There are flags hanging outside of people's houses, house divided, where a husband went to SC, a wife went to UCLA.
Yeah, I see that all the time. You drive by and they've got those flags, the house divided flags. As disgusting as it is, I know it's out there.
You can tell the week of the game down here. Some of them aren't speaking to each other.
So I wasn't expecting to meet a Bruin, but it happens.
He seemed like a very nice guy, real smart, but he was a Trojan.
Nick and Paula Sanchez were dating and had not yet married when they attended the 1997 rivalry game together. The Bruins won 31-24, and a fiery Paula wildly celebrated afterwards.
She was headbutting me in her celebration. I knew that was going to be an issue going forward.
And I just went a little overboard and headbutted him a couple of times.
Oh, it was multiple headbutts. It wasn't just one. And if you've met my wife, you'll see that she's not that big a person, but effective with the headbutt.
A decade after her exuberant victory celebration, Nick asked Paula to wear a USC jersey to the rivalry game against her beloved Bruins.
I'm a Bruin at heart, but here's my brother-in-law. I've known him since he was 7 or 8 years old, and he's a starting quarterback for USC. What am I going to do?
Nick's little brother, Mark Sanchez, was now the starting quarterback for USC.
Having Mark as the quarterback and having a Bruin as a wife, there was a definite discussion.
Do I wear USC gear? Do I wear UCLA gear?
We would see him before the game on the Trojan Walk, so heaven forbid my wife was wearing a UCLA sweatshirt or something.
The first time he threw his pass, when he was a starting quarterback, that's when I decided, okay, I can wear SC gear. I would get voicemails from my friends. What are you doing wearing SC gear? And all I could tell him was, it's my family.
Although she did negotiate for a limited window of while Mark was at USC.
As a matter of fact, I told Nick, and I told Mark, and I told the whole family, when he's gone from SC, I'm having a bonfire.
So after Mark was done with USC, she was able to go back and wear those other tattered clothes that she enjoys so much.
It was the Trojans who were in tatters through most of the 90s, with UCLA knocking them flat for most of the decade. But not before USC took the 1990 game in a shootout for the ages.
The 90 game was absolutely unbelievable because you had the teams going back and forth. 6 touchdowns in the fourth quarter.
That might be the most exciting game I've ever broadcast. Back and forth and back and forth.
I thought we were going to lose the game that whole fourth quarter, and then
I call him Johnny Hero. I don't even call him Johnny Morton. He's Johnny Hero.
The heroic moments would end for USC after the 1990 game, as UCLA got to strut its stuff on an 8-game winning streak starting in 1991.
If you would have come to me and said, hey, UCLA is going to win the next 8 SC football games, I would have thought you were insane.
And if you were a USC fan, it just seemed like every year you were watching a new UCLA tailback just cut you to shreds.
It's year after year after year. You think, there's no way this is going to keep going.
In 1996, Trojan fans felt like the streak would finally end after they jumped all over the Bruins and had a 38-17 lead in the fourth quarter.
SC is just killing them at the end of 3 quarters. We're having a great time. Game's over. So we got up and left because I got to go see my daughter play soccer. I'm not going to stay and watch the end of this blowout.
With less than 7 minutes to play, USC still led by 17 points. After a UCLA field goal and a change of possession, the Bruins got the ball back down by 2 touchdowns. Realizing the game was probably lost, UCLA quarterback Cade McNown implored his teammates to at least play for pride and finish the season with one last great drive.
I remember going into the huddle and just telling everybody in the huddle, this is our last game of the year. We're not going to a bowl game. Let's just finish strong. Let's just finish this series with a touchdown. And sure enough, we marched down, we scored a touchdown, and then they fumbled.
Fumble, Bruins have it! Kasani Abdul-Salam with the football to the outside!
I'd never been so nervous in my life because now I had to go from this mindset of being where I just wanted to finish with a touchdown to, oh my gosh, we could actually win this thing. This is a miracle.
Given new life, the Bruins marched down the field, and with 44 seconds left, UCLA got the ball to the USC 11.
Without a touchdown at the 1, they'll run it. Hicks up the middle, touchdown UCLA!
Skip Hicks's touchdown sent the game into overtime.
All of a sudden we're in overtime. It's like new game, and the pendulum had swung.
It was the first and only time that the rivalry game would be decided in overtime. In the second overtime, Hicks struck again with an amazing 25-yard touchdown run. Needing a touchdown, the Trojans lined up on 4th down and were forced to throw a desperation pass.
Throws it into the air, the Bruins win!
The moral for me and for anybody who was there that day is always do everything you can possibly do and don't worry about the things you can't control. You never know because you might get a shot.
Oh, you know, and you just want to hide. You don't want to go outside. You don't want to talk to anybody.
USC's pain continued with the Bruins dominating throughout the 90s, culminating with the 1998 game, which featured a legendary performance by Deshaun Foster. Foster's 4 touchdowns in the victory over USC tied Charles White's rivalry record for most touchdowns in a game.
Sometimes big games bring out the best in big-time players. And you talk about a big-time performance by Deshaun Foster, 4 touchdowns in a rivalry game.
He was a stud, and he just kept taking the handoffs and going in there, and he'd get hit right at the line of scrimmage and somehow fall forward 10 yards.
The 1998 game was the only game I didn't work as a sportscaster because it was the beginning of my bachelor party. Me and 10 of my friends were going to go to the SC-UCLA football game, immediately leave there and fly to Vegas for 3 days. So had UCLA lost that game, it would have been a very bad start to not only my bachelor party, but potentially to my marriage. I owe a big thank you to Deshaun Foster. So Deshaun, thank you. You saved my bachelor party.
The 1998 34-17 victory over USC was UCLA's 20th straight win, and that team, led by an amazing offense, is considered one of the best Bruin squads of all time.
This is the best offense our school has ever had. They were unstoppable. They averaged, think about this, averaged north of 40 points a game.
The 1998 season marked the end of an era for USC when Trojans superfan Giles Pellerin died at halftime of the UCLA game. Pellerin had attended 797 consecutive games over the course of 73 years, and he served as the greatest example of the deep passion that the fans of USC and UCLA show their teams when they battle in late fall.
You've got hundreds of thousands, some that obviously don't even make it into the stadium, that are fired up for their team to celebrate that day, UCLA and USC battling it out.
There are definitely more people that can fit in the stadium outside tailgating and having a good time. And
you can stop at every tailgate party along the way and you will know someone. There's nowhere else in the country that's like that, anywhere.
You got to watch out. If you're at the Rose Bowl and somebody offers you some food and they're dressed in blue and gold, I don't think you take it. You just got to be careful.
It's really not a game day, it's a game week. They start pulling pranks on the other school on Sunday and Monday.
You've got to tape up Tommy Trojan and you tape up the Bear so they don't get paint all over them.
People are hazing each other. I've had my house toilet papered with USC toilet paper.
One year, the USC students, they infiltrated the UCLA section and rigged their card section.
Every single card stunt had up in the corner a little block SC.
And there was another time when USC dumped hundreds of crickets into the UCLA library during finals week.
It's a long time ago, but I remember hearing about the helicopter coming over and dropping the load of manure on Tommy Trojan.
But they forgot that when you're in a helicopter, the rotor blades suck air up. So they dump the bags over all at the same time. So 1, 2, 3, let's dump. And then the fertilizer starts to go down and the rotor blades suck it back up and it goes right back up into the helicopter. And these brainiacs are covered with crap.
That's a great commentary on the quality of a UCLA education.
One of the first pranks in the rivalry involved USC students stealing UCLA's victory bell in 1941. A return of the bell was later negotiated with the agreement that the winner of the rivalry game would keep the bell until the next year's game. 1942 was the first year the bell was up for grabs, and it was won by UCLA, also marking the first time the Bruins had beaten the Trojans in football. Although USC has won the bell more times than UCLA, the Bruins' 1998 victory over the Trojans allowed them to keep the bell for 8 consecutive seasons, the longest streak in the series.
We were on top and we had the victory bell with us the whole time, so it was great.
Those of us who went to UCLA never had more fun than during those 8 years ribbing the USC people.
It's like they still couldn't get used to winning, even though they won 8 in a row. And I'd have a dozen messages when I got home, hearing the UCLA shared fight song that they have with Cal.
Yeah, the same fight song as Cal. You think they'd be creative, but it's all the UC thing and they're all the same. I'm not sure if Santa Cruz and San Bernardino or Riverside and all these other schools have the same fight song or not.
When it comes to marching bands, USC has one of the best in the nation, and their signature song, Tribute to Troy, can be heard throughout every USC game.
The USC fans love that song. And you'll see them, they'll respond, they'll throw up the 2 fingers, they go crazy. and everyone else hates it. It just drives people crazy because you have to listen to it over and over and over again, from the very start of the game to the very end.
The music kind of drives you crazy, I'll be honest with you, that, you know, it's not the same old thing.
It's a war chant. I can't imagine why we would want them to like hearing it. And the fact that they play it over and over, you know, it's kind of like our offensive line just bearing down on them over and over and over again.
It's the perfect complement to what we do as athletes, you know, as football players, and conquest and being a warrior and raising the sword and fighting on, no matter what, no matter where, no matter when, you always fight on.
That song is so fucking annoying.
Unfortunately for UCLA fans, the Trojans band had good reason to play the song in 1999 after USC finally broke the Bruins' 8-game win streak with a 17-7 win.
It was good to get out from under that rock, I'll tell you what. It was real good.
Although USC beat UCLA with wins in 1999 and 2000, the team was still struggling, and Trojan fans wondered if they would ever return to the glory years of McKay and Robinson. Former USC All-American Paul McDonald was asked that question at an alumni booster event.
My answer was, I don't think so. I don't think they can get back. You've got TV, everyone's on TV. That used to be a huge advantage for the Trojans. Limited scholarships, everybody has 85 scholarships. So it's just level, it levels the playing field. I don't see the Trojans ever getting back to the way it was in the 70s and the 60s. I just don't see it happening.
USC administrators felt that if they were ever to have a shot at returning Trojan football to national prominence, they would need to hire a new coach. USC Athletic Director Mike Garrett announced that he had hired Pete Carroll, a former NFL coach with a career 33-31 record. The reaction in Trojan Nation was immediate.
USC fans went crazy when the word got out that Pete Carroll might get hired as the Trojans' next coach. People telling Mike Garrett, are you nuts?
Pete's getting ready to do his press conference, and you can see the concern/disdain for the choice.
Things did not get off to a good start for the Trojans as teams ran all over them in the first half of the season, adding fuel to the fire for critics of Coach Carroll.
Pete Carroll's first season in 2001, the Trojans started 1-5. Not good. Everyone's scratching their head saying, you know, did we do the right thing?
After struggling through a 1-5 start, Carroll's team won 4 straight, and USC entered the UCLA game flying high with a chance to finish the regular season with a winning record and a bowl game invitation. However, as the Bruins kicked off, they were a heavy favorite in Carroll's first game against them.
I remember clearly the first years how intense it was, you know, and we weren't a very good football team the first year. They had a better record than us that year.
UCLA's got a better team. You know, everyone looks at that season and thinks, well, this is UCLA's going to take it to them. But the wheels start coming off the Bruins.
Led by a spectacular interception return for a touchdown by Trojans defensive back Antoine Simmons, USC easily glided to a 27-0 victory, the first Trojan shutout of the Bruins since 1947.
We came in and beat them pretty good, and that was the kind of start of USC back to the glory days.
That's really part of the turning point for USC. That's really what helps launch them into the Pete Carroll era. Pete Carroll's time at USC was as good as it has ever been for USC.
Growing up, my dad wasn't a UCLA fan, wasn't a USC fan, but he hated USC. When they were recruiting me, he just thought it was, you know, it was a joke. Like, I can't believe these guys even have the balls to send my kid a letter. It all changed for him when he met Pete Carroll. My dad went up there and actually met with him right before I committed. You know, told him, you know, I don't really care if he's a great football player. I care about what type of man he's going to be. And something struck with my dad, and my dad came out of that meeting like, this, you know, this is the guy, this is where we're going to be.
He's one of the more spontaneous people that I've ever met. You know, the guy is really fun to be around, and he made the game fun for his kids.
Football was fun. Now, they worked hard, but he instilled, I think, the things that are really important to him. Competition was incredibly important to him.
Pete just instilled this confidence in us, and that every Saturday we went out there, we knew we would win. We expected to win, and that was the mindset we had.
Starting in 2002, Carroll's Trojans played in 7 straight BCS bowl games and won 6 of them, including back-to-back national championships in 2003 and 2004. The 2004 Trojans are considered one of the best teams in the history of college football.
Throwing for Smith in the end zone. It is caught. Touchdown, USC. It is unbelievable.
Talent, and more talent made those teams special. And great coaching. You've got to have great coaching. They had some superior coaching, but they had amazingly gifted players.
It's really cool to be a part of that, you know, to win the championship outright, to be looked at as possibly one of the best college football teams to ever play. And more importantly, just the guys that I played with, man. Some great guys, you know, some great friendships I made and some great football players.
Just like Trojan fans had to suffer through the Bruins streak of 8 straight wins, the first decade of the new millennium was a bleak period for UCLA fans.
Nobody's wearing powder blue. They're not even walking around the streets wearing stuff anymore. They're just hiding. They're doing the hiding we were doing 10 years before.
One of the unfortunate byproducts for UCLA fans during the losing streak was having to watch a lot of Traveler, the USC mascot horse that runs around the Coliseum after every USC touchdown and win.
UCLA people hate that horse. That horse comes out of the tunnel, we just look at it and say, are you kidding me?
It just pissed you off as a player. You know, you just wanted somebody to knock him down.
There's so many discussions of the things that we could do to Traveler on the sideline.
Former Bruins football player Dave Davoff fondly recalls a prank that allowed UCLA fans to tease the Trojans about their beloved horse.
Jim Stanley, an ex-ball player for UCLA, stole a band uniform and came out on with a donkey and followed Traveler. Of course, UCLA was just roaring in the seats.
Former USC football player John Papadakis has a simple explanation for why UCLA fans hate the USC horse so much.
It's because they see it so many times when we score on them. They see it every time it comes out, we've scored, right?
Just put the ball in the end zone and shut up. When we were stomping them in basketball, it's not like we let a bear out of its cage and have them run around the court.
Maybe UCLA should have a bear. I mean, if they brought out this big snarling bear in a cage, you know, that would probably be more impressive than what they've got right now.
We have a horse, a big white horse, and they've got a guy in a teddy bear outfit. It's no contest.
Although the Trojans were the dominant team through the first decade of the 2000s, there are no guaranteed victories when you play your rival.
When I was a freshman and sophomore, I kept hearing, the records mean nothing, records mean nothing. That phrase, you know, records mean nothing, they literally mean nothing.
In 2005, USC trounced the Bruins 66-19, and going into the 2006 rivalry game, the Trojans were 10-1, while the Bruins were 6-5, so it looked like it would be more of the same. A USC victory would put the Trojans in a position to play for the national championship for an amazing 4th consecutive season. Against all odds, USC trailed late in the game 13-9, but the Trojans drove downfield and had the ball in scoring position. However, USC quarterback John David Booty threw a pass that was intercepted by UCLA defensive back Eric McNeil in a play that sealed the Bruins' upset victory. To add insult to injury, after the game, USC offensive lineman Sam Baker had to endure a long walk with his father and brother past celebrating UCLA fans to get to his car in the parking lot.
There's a lot of drunk people out there let me have it, and it was actually a situation where me, my brother, and my dad almost all threw down on a couple guys just because they were, you know, talking drunk and we weren't in the mood for that. That would have been the wrong fight to pick. It would have been me, my dad, my brother. That's about probably 1,000 pounds right there.
2006 was the only season in a 13-year span that UCLA could wave a victory flag. USC took 12 of 13 games, including a 50-0 massacre of the Bruins in 2011. However, in 2012, UCLA hired new head coach Jim Mora, and the turnaround was immediate. The Bruins flattened the Trojans in 3 consecutive seasons, and the power in the rivalry shifted toward Westwood. Going into the 2015 game, amazingly, USC had 4 head coaches in 3 seasons. However, new coach Clay Helton got the Trojans back on track, leading USC to consecutive victories over their crosstown rival. The outcome of a UCLA-USC game is often the trigger point for an outpouring of debate between family and friends throughout Los Angeles.
It's a big shouting match.
There's always a little bit of trash talking.
Now you can call them, you can text them, you can put it on Twitter, you can put them on Facebook, you can send them an email. There's 900 different ways to talk smack.
Fans of USC and UCLA will argue that they have the most intense rivalry in the nation because the two teams must share the same city, and there is an extreme proximity to the enemy.
We had a couple of our players one year living in the same apartment complex and in the same apartment as two USC players. And so the week of the game, we simply wouldn't send the playbooks home with those two guys because we were afraid that those playbooks would get in the hands of their roommates.
You know, most of the guys at SC, you might not be personal friends with them, but you know of these guys and you've been watching them. So, you know, it was a big rivalry.
Remember, these are the kind of guys you played high school with or against. I certainly did.
We know a lot of those USC players. There's a little bit of hatred, I'm not going to lie to you.
It's the same person that you say, I love you to, but there's still a hatred because they're wearing the wrong colors.
About, you know, just attacking and hurting and pounding people.
I would say something every once in a while, but then I'd also go hide behind like Deuce Latui, you know, all 6'6" of them.
I played on a defense called the Wild Bunch, and I played with one kid named Toady Smith. Well, Toady was kind of wild. He took a bite out of Dennis Dummett's rear end. When he sacked him one time, bit right through his pants and into his buttocks, and left a mark on him.
The intensity of the rivalry reached a fever pitch during the 2009 game. In the closing seconds of that game, USC, leading 21-7, took a knee to run out the clock. However, UCLA coach Rick Neuheisel called a timeout. On the next play, UCLA expected the Trojans to take another knee, but USC threw a pass for a long touchdown.
Throwing long for Damian Williams. He got it. Touchdown USC.
Trojan players and coach Pete Carroll celebrated effusively. An angry UCLA team responded by walking toward USC's sideline, almost sparking a brawl.
They were about to scrap, you know, everybody was all heated up, and I go, I wish I was a player and I could run out on the field and just hit some guy in the face mask from SC.
As an SC fan, I liked it because it was kind of like a, well, you want to call timeout? Here you go. You know, we'll score.
Typical USC classishness. You know, the game's over. Pete Carroll decides to rub it in our face.
We have shocking news coming from the USC football team tonight. The starting kicker, Mario Dinello, was found dead today.
Just days after kicking in USC's 2007 Rose Bowl victory over Michigan, junior kicker Mario Dinello died in an accidental fall off a cliff near his home. Dinello was 21 years old.
How do you swallow that? Unbelievable. Here's a guy who's at the peak of his career, place kicker, and great guy. Shocking when I heard that. And Michael, my son, who was the holder for Mario Dinello, got a text from Will Collins. Will Collins was the first person I think that heard that we knew.
You loved the guy. You knew this guy is just a fantastic person to be around because he was never in a bad mood. He was always happy. He's just a great guy to be around.
It's funny, a lot of kickers kind of get slack for being different, you know, being a little weird. Mario was cool, you know, Mario was just one of the boys, and he was just a good dude.
He just loved competing. He loved being with the guys. That was his fraternity. You'd always call him up and ask him how he's doing, and he'd say, I'm living the dream, just having a good day, you know, I'm playing football. It doesn't get any better than this.
When Mario passed, we all rallied around each other, and we rallied around his family because we needed to lift each other up and lean on each other.
They were pretty much my parents and our life support system for that time, and it was unconditional help and love that they showed towards our family, which is something we could have never asked for or even expected.
Dinello's brother Joey is a 2000 graduate of UCLA, where he spent a year as a student trainer for the athletic department. Although a proud Bruin, Joey was tremendously touched by the outpouring of support from USC to his family and the tribute to Mario at the first game of the 2007 season.
about the try for point, and they have not put a kicker onto the field, and there is a reason for this, Pete.
It is the memorial for Mario Dinello, who passed away in the wintertime.
Now what they're going to do is they are going to take a delay of game penalty as a tribute to Mario Dinello.
It kind of like put a stamp on the end of his playing career, and that we're never going to be able to get to see him again. And it was neat that those guys did that for him. It was kind of jaw-dropping just to see what it means to be a Trojan family.
Although the Trojan family showed tremendous respect in honoring one of their fallen players, another very special tribute to Dinello came from a place one might not expect.
I swore that I would never have any USC memorabilia in my bar, only Bruin stuff. As I opened the restaurant and got to know people in town, I ran into one of my old fraternity brothers, Joey Dinello.
When my brother passed away, we got his jerseys from the school, and without hesitation, James goes, "Let's put it up in the bar." And I asked him, I go, "Are you sure? Because it's going to look weird with all this Bruin stuff here." And he said, "Absolutely."
I think that putting the Bruin and Trojan animosity aside, that was a good thing to do. This kid was well respected in the community, well respected by Bruins and Trojans, and to hang his jersey in a Bruin bar was something special.
You can be arch rivals. You can hate each other's guts on the field, but off the field, you know what? We're all humans. And a guy like Mario, his memory deserves to be honored, no matter if you wear blue and gold or cardinal gold.
When it's all said and done, we all live in Los Angeles, and we were all part of a much bigger family than our own little Bruins or Trojans. I think it gets down to the ability to have that standard of sportsmanship and respect, and I think UCLA and SC have it.
Because you share that bond, you share the love of this game of football, and you share this incredible rivalry.
When the game came, it was a war. But when the game was over, we went out and had a beer together. We were friends.
The majority of my friends that I had when I was in the NFL were Trojans. To this day, I call Ronnie Lott for anything. He's there for me.
As much as we talk a lot of smack and as much as we go through what we go through, a guy like James Washington would say what he said about me and saying that, hey, he can count on me. And to me, that's the ultimate respect. And that's what you get when you compete against people.
I'm going to see people I played against all the time. And all the hatred stuff and the bitterness, the bitter rivalry and all that all gets washed out. And you're brothers because you were on a field together competing, and maybe you got the best of him, he got the best of you, but it doesn't matter anymore. What matters is that you were out there doing your best together at a time when you were both young and, full of fight and energy and all that.
It's almost connected in a way where you don't even want to sever the umbilical cord. Even though we hate each other, we love each other. We will never sever the love of that moment and the love of the rivalry of UCLA and USC. But more importantly, we will always find ways to love each other because that's just what we do.
A City Divided was created to bring USC and UCLA together to support cancer research in a campaign called Rivals United for a Cure. And I'm so proud that they have joined forces in this important fight.
I was approached by Jack Barrich, director of The City Divided, about making a film about the USC-UCLA football rivalry. During our meeting, we realized that to make this film really special, we have to attach ourselves to some philanthropic effort. We didn't know what that was going to be. And then I thought about my relationship with Barry Hoven. And Barry has this entity called Kure It that he recently formed. He wanted to create more of an awareness for his nonprofit, and he agreed that using this film to expand his charity would be an awesome idea, and that's how Rivals United for a Cure was born.
So I get a call from Paul. He says, hey Matt, let's have lunch. We're gonna meet and we're gonna make a film about the rivalry and we're gonna cure cancer. And Paul shows up with Barry, a Trojan, Jack, a Trojan, and of course Paul, and I'm thinking, wow, I'm getting ambushed. What could this film be about? Are they gonna beat me up and that's the film?
So when I first called Matt, he was, of course, listening to what I was saying about this great idea that we had about the film and the charity and cancer research. But I could hear on the other side of the phone that he was sort of going, oh yeah, sure, Paul, with all you Trojans calling me, is this going to be a fair fight? But I think because of his commonality with Barry and the fact that they're both cancer survivors, that's what put him over the top, and that's when he joined our cause.
So I started talking to Barry, and Barry's an avid USC Trojan, but I could tell he was struggling. And I looked down at his feet, and he was wearing sandals, and his feet were real swollen, and I go, hey, your hand's swollen too? And he goes, yeah, I also have this side effect, and I started telling him about my cancer struggles. And we went back and forth. It's almost like when you're a cancer survivor, you're like a war veteran, and you're sharing, gunshot wounds and stuff like that. And Barry and I just started talking, and it wasn't about USC or UCLA. It was just about, how do we get this fixed? How do you overcome cancer? How is he going to feel just at the end of the day? And suddenly I realized, this was bigger than the rivalry, and I was just feeling blessed to meet him.
After I was diagnosed, I quickly learned there was very little research funding for rare cancers like kidney cancer. So we started Kure It because I didn't want other people to have to go through what I went through with this terrible disease.
It was Barry's willingness to, really take this risk on a film, and he seeded the film to start with, and his conviction and his belief that this could really send us to another level with what we were doing, and it paid off. We've netted almost $2 million over the course of 5 years in the process of his stepping forward and taking that chance. Barry was a rare individual in how he approached life, in that this courage that he had to have to withstand not only 18 years of dealing with cancer, and I can't even tell you the number of surgeries he had, but it was the fact that he wanted to do something about it. And he took that leap. He was very proactive. He was not a victim. He was a powerful guy in the whole process. And for that, he's one of the most amazing guys I've ever known.
He's a guy that never gave up. And he had an idea, and the idea was to cure cancer. Meanwhile, he was struggling. He was fighting every day. And he was such a role model to me, and he meant so much. And for him not to be here, but us to continue fighting for cancer, it really means a lot to me.
A city divided.
A city divided.
A city divided becomes a city united.
Bruins and Trojans.
Bruins and Trojans coming together.
Coming together.
Coming together to fight cancer.
We will unite.
We will fight.
And we will win.
And we will win.
And we will win.
And we will win.
And we will win.